Welcome to For the Love of Books, a podcast by Lanarkshire Libraries. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Lanarkshire Libraries podcast For the Love of Books. My name is Chris Wilson, the E-Services Librarian, and happy Halloween, because this is going out on Halloween, and we hope you're having a fantastic time and enjoying all the spooky season that's going on. And because it is a bit of a spooky season, I thought we'd have a little bit of a look at some Halloween themed recommendations. So I put out a little bit of a call to our staff members earlier in the week to ask them what was their favourite spooky reads or scary reads and things like that. And I have got quite a good response back. I think about 10 people have got back to me in total. And so all I thought we'd do is we'd run through some of the staff recommendations to see if any of them might make their way onto your to-read piles just in time, or just for a little spooky extra season to continue a little bit longer after Halloween. And also, I managed to get hold of one of them to get and come and chat to me about what they love about horror books and stuff like that. So this is where we are going to go and see all about them. And we'll start off with the first person that got back to me was Letty, who is one of our library assistants at Steps Library. So Letty got back to me, and her recommendation was Through the Woods, an anthology of scary stories by Emily Carroll. And she also said she also had a couple of recommendations for ones that aren't in stock at the moment, but it might be something you might be interested in, which are Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield and The Illuminous Dead by Caitlin Sterling, which she had described as both chilling and enthralling. I super highly recommend those. So that is Letty's recommendation. If you want to go and check them out, you can probably go and have a little look to find out more about Through the Woods on our online catalogue if you want to go and do that. Next person that got back to me was one of our library assistants, Jackie, who was recommending John Boyne's This House is Haunted. And she said it was a great wee story and it's so different from his other writing. So if you're a fan of his and you want to kind of maybe get something that's also in keeping with the spooky season that we're currently in, that might be one that is worth checking out if you haven't already done so. Also, I got a reply from Emma, one of our library assistants, and she has got a few recommendations for us. One was What Moves the Dead and What Feasts at Night by T. Kingfisher. What she said was that they were the first two books of the Sworn Soldier series, which with the third one still to come out, so there's one to look out for if you do enjoy these. They are spooky gothic horror novels with a great and really likable character as the narrator, which is also very, very important. She loved them because once they got started, they really never stopped, and they were full of really freaky and descriptive scenes, as well as a lot of humour from the characters, which was a nice little balance for her. Our other recommendation was The Hunger by Alma Katsu, and which she described as a dark retelling of the story of the Donner Party, a group of pioneers travelling across America in a wagon party. And it was a great read if you love to hate characters and love a bit of gore as well. So that's another kind of really interesting couple of recommendations there too. We also got a recommendation from one of our library assistants, Lauren. She had recently really read and really enjoyed a book called The Favourite Daughter by Kira Ruda, I think that was pronounced it. And it's about a girl who is mourning her sister and lives with her narcissistic mum, her mother. Lauren managed to read it in a day, and she wanted to find out what the mystery was, and even without all the family dynamics, it kept her hooked all the way through. One of the other recommendations she had as well was Pet Sematary by Stephen King, who I don't think there's much introduction needed for Stephen King. He is such a massive horror writer. She's read a few of his books, and she always prefers the ones that tackle tough subjects. This time around, it was grief in Pet Sematary, and it's about how we handle unexpected tragedy and what we're willing to do to hold on to people we love. And that's an interesting little bit, because We will be talking to one of the staff, who is Russell Brown, the library's community manager, and he will we'll be talking a lot about Stephen King in that little segment just a little bit later on. So do keep listening to find out a little bit more about that too. And Russell and Lauren aren't alone in their love for Stephen King, because one of our other library assistants, Claire, is also a massive Stephen King fan, and she put forward the recommendation of Salem's Lot as a scary read. And she basically said to me, who doesn't love a vampire story? And for anyone who saw the David Soul adaptation, the scene with the young boy at the window with her giving plenty of people nightmares. I haven't seen that myself, so maybe it is something to check out. She would recommend it for anyone who wants to try a classic horror story and to enjoy some jump scare moments. Once you've read the book, and there are three adaptations to watch and compare. And the most recent one is just out at the cinema at the moment, so that's also quite a good one to maybe kind of read before you go and get a chance to go and see the new movie that's out as well. She also recommends Paul Tremblay's Head Full of Ghosts. She found it strangely disturbing and wasn't quite sure what was going on throughout, but it had kind of echoes of The Exorcist a little bit for her as well. So another kind of really interesting, scary read to look out. Now, the next person who emailed me was one of our library supervisors, Marie, and she remembered me of something that I loved whenever I read this book, because it was so long ago that I read it and I completely forgot about it. She was saying that one of the books that she used to read to groups of kids was the forward, The Scared Kid from the Charlie Higson book, The Dead. And that is part of a series called The Enemy. And I have read The Enemy by Charlie Higson a long, long time ago. And it's fantastic. It's a brilliant story. It's a kind of young adult book. And it's a kind of zombie story, but it's about kind of the kids are surviving on their own because the sort of virus or whatever it is kind of affects adults, but kids seem unaffected by it. But they then have to survive on their own in this world full of adult zombies and stuff like that sort of stuff. And it's a fantastic series for any kind of young adults who love kind of zombie stories. And it's definitely one that I would recommend. And it was also one that Marie was recommending as well. It was one of the most popular with kids when she read that to the groups of kids that she was working with. It's a fantastic opening to the story, that foreword, and it really pulls the readers in. And that is one of the great things about the Enemy series as well. They always started with a real bang and kind of gripped you from page one. It's very dramatic and thrilling, and the kids loved it. And she's saying that it's also part of that series as well. So that's definitely a series that she would recommend, and I would also recommend that as well. It's a fantastic young adult series for anyone looking to get their young adult boys or girls a bit of a scare of this Halloween with a book. I also got a recommendation from our library assistant Joanne, who recommended the classic Dracula by Bram Stoker, which also has the kind of little link with eLibrary there as well, through the inspiration from Emily Gerard for that story as well. So it's a nice little one to kind of have a look at as well, and it is obviously a massive classic as well. So in terms of scary stories, it is definitely up there, and probably one that should be on every horror fan's to read list for definite, for sure. Now, another one of our library assistants, Bernie, had gave me a recommendation for a kids' book, because I did say that it didn't always have to be an adult book that they recommended, and she gave us The Worst Witch by Jill Murphy. It's a good Halloween book for the kids that love these books, and they're a great wee series of stories with the books that helps them have some scary reads this Halloween as well. So definitely a good recommendation there for in the kids and stuff like that. And I've got a fantastic kids recommendation, which I'm going to keep to the very end of the podcast. So if you want to find out what that is, you'd need to listen the whole way through. But we've got one more recommendation before we get to Russell and his little segment to see what he has to say about horror books and stuff like that as well. and it is from Heather, our library supervisor, and she wanted to recommend three short stories, and again, it features Stephen King, and it is Nightmares and Dreamscapes, Night Shift, and Skeleton Crew, which she says is three of his short stories, a selection of creepy and chilling short stories by one of the greatest horror writers of all time, in her opinion. Often overlooked in lieu of his more famous novels. She first read these books back to back over 20 years ago and still think about the stories from the books regularly. Perfect reading for Halloween. These stories, these spooky tales will stay with you, and you'll never hear a mystery tapping sound in your home in quite the same way again. So that's a nice kind of the well-described story from Heather there. So if that doesn't inspire you to want to kind of find out more about that tapping noise, I don't know what will. But in the next little section, we have got Russell, who is our library community libraries manager, and he's going to tell me all about why he thinks Stephen King is so fantastic and how you go about writing a fantastic horror book. So thanks, Russell, for coming and joining me on our kind of spooky podcast that we're doing today, all about kind of horror books and stuff like that. And I thought I'd try and grab you as a horror fan to see what some of your favourite stories were and stuff like that. And so let's start off with the one that you highlighted to me when I put out the call to all the staff about what their favourite stories were. You said It, and I haven't read the book It, but I have seen about the movie when I was probably far too young to actually see it, and it scared the living daylights out of me. So why is it one of your favourites?
Morning, Chris, or is it afternoon? I can't remember. I think it's one of my favourites for a number of reasons. Firstly, I've always liked the author. I think a lot of people like the author. Is a really popular and famous author. But I think that particular story is one. Historically, I remember it was one of the books I got for Christmas years and years ago and read it over Christmas, and that's always stuck with me. But also the way that he wrote that and the topics that he covered in the story, I think is always struck a chord with me, and it's something that I've always remembered. And I think that the mistake people make about horror is that they think that it's about blood and gore, and that's the main thing, and it's the main popular part of why people read horror stories. In reality, I think it isn't. I think, okay, that's certainly got a part of it, but it's not actually the real reason why people, I think a lot of people read horror. It's about the sense of fear, the sense of the unknown, the looking into darkness. And importantly, and this is what I think Stephen King's really good at, it's about the human condition, and it's exploring different elements of the human condition. It's also about iconic things that as a child you might have been really scared of, and as an adult, you grow up being scared of. So, for example, there's a large amount of people in the world that are scared of clowns. And it is a well-known phobia. So Pennywise, who's the clown stroke monster in the story, I think again it scares an awful lot of people just by the fact that he's been a clown. The fact that he's a dancing clown who also happens to be, spoiler, a monster. I think it probably doesn't help, but the fact that people are scared of clowns, I think is something that is one of the reasons why the book's so popular. And again, it's one of the things that strikes a chord with me. I'm not particularly scared of clowns, but I love the idea that this innocent image of a fun clown is actually a monster that feeds on children. So there's a kind of quirky darkness in that kind of appeals, and also balloons. Balloons become suddenly a really dangerous thing in the story, and who'd have thought a red balloon it would be something that we would be scared of in a normal story, but here a red balloon in particular, because Pennywise hands balloons out and uses them as the tool for for entrapping kids. It becomes a really, again, an ominous thing. So I'm kind of rambling a little bit about it's about a clown, it's about balloons, but it's also about the human condition, and that's the kind of main thing we can probably explore as part of this.
Yeah, I know. I think that as a thing. I think whenever it comes to kind of horror books and stuff like that, I think that kind of like unusual kind of thing that you maybe would think is that scary is one of the things that kind of makes it kind of probably quite terrifying in a way if it's done right and done well, which I think is one of the things that Stephen King does do very well. And Stephen King did come up quite a lot when I put out the call to ask a lot of staff about what their favourite horror and scary stories were. And it's pretty much as his name and his name says, he is pretty much the king of the genre, I would say. And it's quite impressive. He's just managed to write so many kind of iconic titles, isn't it?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. But again, I think that there's a number of reasons why. He's obviously a good writer. He's got an amazing imagination, and he writes in a way that's really accessible, but it's also very relatable. Even in this book, which again, the kind of main theme of all of his stories is darkness and that otherworldliness and the things that can go bump in the night. But he spends a lot of his time in his books exploring things that are familiar to us, that might not be pleasant, but are familiar. So, for instance, in this book, he explores bullying as a concept, and the impact on some of the central characters who are all bullied by this horrible bully called Henry Bowers. He explores through Henry Bowers and through the interaction between this small group of kids. By the way, the kind of central premise of the story is that there's a group of children, early teens, who call themselves the kind of losers club, and they're the ones that take on this monster called It. But they all come together because of bullying and because of this other character called Henry Bowers. But the experience through Henry, in particular, things like racism, sexism, and these are the issues that he explores through these characters, and he explores early, childhood and puberty and how they experience going through life and their early lives. And I think that again is the central premise of the story. Those are the subplots, if you like, that are the things that people can relate to, none of which in reality are horror or scary, but there are twists because it's King. And he makes them scary because it's about your experiences. Were you bullied? Did you experience, sexism? Certainly will do. And do you experience racism? How did that make you feel? And he experienced, and he describes those issues through these central characters. And that, I think, is what makes him such a popular author, because he's relatable to your own personal experiences.
Yeah, it is. I think I think that's the kind of thing about them. A lot of these titles, and I mean, he does have so many iconic ones that they all do kind of relate back to something that you can kind of almost kind of see as part of something that would maybe experience yourself a little bit in some way, or could envisage yourself kind of experiencing if you haven't. So they're all kind of very kind of real stories, although they are also very imaginative as well at the same time, with the kind of some of the kind of things that happen in them and stuff like that. What is it that makes a great horror story or scary story for you? Kind of moving away a little bit from kind of Stephen King himself, or what is it that kind of thing you think kind of really kind of grabs you as a kind of horror or scary story?
I think it's the unknown is the scariest bit. Again, going back to what I said earlier, it's not the blood and the gore. It's not the violence. It's not describing someone carving someone up, although these can be quite horrific. I don't think they're the most powerful, scary parts of a story. I'll give you an example. One of the most scariest scenes I've ever read in any book was actually not a horror book at all. It was Lord of the Flies. And there was a section there which was I can't remember the name of the chapter, but it was Pig Head on Stick. And essentially what it was a conversation between one of the central characters and a dead pig's head that was stuck on a stick that turned out to be the devil. And it was the devil's conversation with this central character, and it was terrifying. The way he wrote that, and the way the conversation went, and the way it made the character feel. And all it was, horrible as it was a dead pig's head that one of the tribe they caught, and they stuck it on a stick. And that, they're so not particularly horrific or gory, but the main part of it was the dialogue, which I felt was really scary. So I think that things like that, are more scary than the kind of gore. If there's a character in a house, and that there's a murderer somewhere in the house, but you don't know where they are. And you end up, how many times you end up shouting at the screen, "Don't go in there," or "Don't leave that," or "Don't go there." because you know they're in danger, but you don't know where that danger is going to appear. And I think things like that actually, for me, are far more scary. And I think that they appeal far more to people, and that's one of the reasons why we like horror.
Yeah, that is true, and I think the other thing about like you say that kind of whole sort of gore thing and stuff like that. Sometimes it can be kind of too overused, and it actually distracts a little bit from the actual story, and kind of just becomes too much. And it's almost as if sometimes the author kind of relies on that to kind of sort of almost make it a horror story, but really that other stuff can kind of make it more of a horror story where you don't know what's happening and stuff like that, make it sound
no, absolutely, I totally agree with that.
But as with many books, and there are so many horror books that have been made into films that have been inspired by the book and things like that. Do you have any favourite movies that you kind of like to watch, especially kind of around about this spooky time at Halloween and stuff like that, that really originated from the pages of a book?
It's probably loads. I think the most obvious ones are It, obviously the two films that they made. The Shining, I think, is a really great version. The Kubrick version, I think, is fabulous. It's now a cult classic. And although, interesting enough, apparently Stephen King loathed it. He absolutely hated apparently hated the Kubrick version because he felt that I forget the guy's name now, but the dad, who, because obviously it's a descent into madness essentially is the premise of the story because of an evil hotel. Go figure, a hotel's evil. But he didn't like the way the central character was portrayed. He didn't. He thought it wasn't true to the book. So ever since then, he's always said that he doesn't like The Shining at all, which is strange considering it's become such a cult classic. And also when you consider that how many Stephen King stories and books and that have been translated into movies and they've been absolute rubbish. They've been really, really bad. And this is probably one of their best known, and he doesn't like it. So I think that one kind of sticks out for me. I think a lot of the others are probably straight to film, like the Halloween and things like that.
As you know, it is interesting that it happens so often with the kind of really kind of iconic movie. They're all kind of Stephen King books, like you say, like The Shining and It, and there's Misery and Carrie and things like that.
Absolutely,
It's quite. Do you think that's a testament to how well he creates his characters and the drama in the books and stuff like that? That so many of them actually translate so well to the screen. Although, like you say, some are a bit.
Some of them don't. Some of them don't. Oh, absolutely. I absolutely think so. I mean, if you look at things like Shawshank Redemption or The Green Mile, which really aren't. They're not horrors by any means. They're thrillers, if you like, more than anything else. I think the way that he writes those stories, both of which actually were short stories. Well, Green Mile was actually a series of short publications, six volume short publication. Shawshank Redemption was actually a novella. But I think it's really very much about, again, how he describes the rendition, how he creates characters, how he makes those characters relatable. And I think that, and also the other bit that there's always a bit of a twist. There's always something at the end that's waiting for you to explore. The most obvious, probably one of the most famous, is in the Shawshank Redemption, that you go through this entire film, and all the while the main character is actually digging an escape route, and you don't know that until towards the end, or the one of the main characters in Green Mile is probably possessed by an angel. And that gives him these particular powers to heal people. So there's always that twist and that kind of otherworldly element to his books, which again very much appeals to me. Not much of that is horror, but it's become hugely popular, and I think that's the reason why. I think it's because he writes well, he's got good characterization, good plot, and it's very relatable.
And the Shawshank Redemption, the movie, is one of my all-time favourites, and it's a fantastic story, and I think it's just like you say, that kind of sort of twist about like how you just don't kind of see it happen, and then it's kind of slowly revealed and things like that in the movie at the end, and he kind of as he kind of escapes and stuff. It's a brilliant movie, fantastic. And do you know, I've never actually read the story either.
Have you not?
No, and it's one of those ones that I've always wanted to, but I've just kind of never quite got round to.
I think it's in the book.
Probably do that.
Yeah, it's in the book. I think it's in the book called Different Seasons.
Yeah,
and it's the first novella, and it's called Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption. Sorry,
yeah.
that's the librarian in me coming out and saying that.
Yeah, no, it is, and it's like I say, one day I will get around to reading it, but because I do love the movie so much, and I think it's only right that I should kind of read where where it originated from to kind of see the difference. But yeah, it's a fantastic one. And now I know that you have kind of done a bit of writing yourself in the past, and I wondered if you took any inspiration from any particular writers or stories and things like that. I'm kind of thinking that maybe Stephen King maybe was part of that influence, possibly with your love of it and things like that.
Yeah.
Is there anyone in particular other than that, or including Stephen King?
Yeah, not direct lift or anything like that. Let's be there's laws against that and copyright. I think influence-wise, possibly, there's a number of authors and writers that probably influenced me in terms of the style that I use, or but I think it's very much for me about what interests me, and I like that quirkiness, I like that twist, I like that slight thing that you don't expect, and that's probably definitely come from kind of Stephen King. But there's a lot of authors that I've admired that, if you could be even remotely as good as them, then that would be great. But and I think style wise, certainly, open styles, relatable characters, not too much description, but focused description are things I've tried to kind of achieve that people like Stephen King have certainly done, which I've kind of copied from that point of view. But it's more about the story. It's more about developing a story, and developing a concept and an idea and subplots within stories. And again, I think like a lot of authors, it's not about the overarching headline story. So going back to It class example, it's about a monster clown. It's actually not about a monster clown. He's central to the character. It's about the people. It's about their lives. It's about what they experience. It's about the issues that they have to deal with. And I certainly do that as well, because that's what I'm more interested in. And again, it might be about there's monsters in the stuff I write, but it's not about the monsters. It's about the people. So I think, from that point of view, there's definitely sort of influenced me, the way I write.
Fantastic. To finish off our wee segment here, I thought I would find out if there was one book that you would recommend for someone to look at that was looking for a kind of frightful read. What would that be? And I'm going to challenge you to not say it.
All right, no, I won't say it. I can probably give you two, actually.
Okay.
The first one I've already mentioned is The Shining. Stick with it because it's not an easy read. And it's quite dark, and The Shining is very, very much about a descent into madness by the central character. So that's not an easy read, but it's also, again, is linked into, it's about an hotel that's evil. And interesting enough, he actually he comes back to that story in later novels like Doctor Sleep, because they revisit the Overlook Hotel area, which is the evil hotel in the story, the possessed hotel in the story in The Shining. But there are elements and again, going back to why I like that book, there's a scene in the book where the Danny, the little boy, is riding around on his tricycle around the empty corridors of the hotel, because the central character is the guy that descends into madness, and I can't remember his name for now, so people remind me who he is. He's the caretaker of the hotel during the winter, and they're completely blocked off by all the snow. So this little boy just goes around the empty corridors on his tricycle, and at one point he's riding down an empty corridor, and the fire hose comes off the wall and falls down in front of him, and he can't cross it. And he imagines this fire hose full of bees, and the bees are going to come out and attack him. And that's actually a really terrifying scene, And it's got nothing to do with monsters and horror and things like that. But again, it goes back to what we've talked about before. It's about the fear of the unknown and the fear of the danger you put in. So I'd very much recommend that one. And one that's completely out of left field, I guess, from one sense, is called Falling Angel, by a guy called Nikos Kazantzakis. And that actually, you'll know it because it was made into a film called Angel Heart with Mickey Rooney. And it's about a guy who as to I can remember this. He's a detective in the 1950s, and he's been asked to go and find a person that's gone missing. And the story is about him going to New Orleans in particular and finding this person who's missing. And spoiler, the person that's missing is him, because he's a devil worshipper, and the only way he could escape the devil was by forgetting who he was and creating himself as a new person. And the story is about him exploring and finding himself. And he's seen with the devil. There's a famous scene in the book, in the film, because Robert De Niro plays the devil, or it's called Louis Cypher. Put it together, Lucifer. He plays Louis Cypher in the film. And there's a couple of scenes where, because it's Louis Cypher that hires him to find himself. You know, because once he finds himself and realizes who he is, he's sold his soul to the devil. So it's the way the devil gets the soul back. So it's a fascinating story. A lot of darkness in it, but very much, I think, one that I would recommend to people to read or go and watch the film. Watch the film. Maybe I should have said that one earlier when you were talking about film books being made into films.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. And one last question for you, which I didn't put on your question sheet that I gave you earlier on. That says going out on Halloween. So what are you going out dressed as for Halloween this year?
It, obviously, with a balloon. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Russell, for coming to us about some of your kind of favourite horror stories and stuff like that, and about what kind of inspired some of your writing and stuff whenever you've been doing that. And I think it's definitely kind of, I think you've definitely touched on some of the really kind of important parts about kind of horror writing, horror stories and stuff like that, in terms of kind of the importance of the kind of like the unknowns and things like that, and actually kind of just almost kind of the well-known phobias and stuff like that, that kind of really is what kind of really can end up being the terrifying part of things, rather than kind of just the sort of gory kind of chopping up people and all that kind of stuff that you kind of see in some films and books and stuff like that. I think that does really kind of touch on what is kind of really important in terms of making that kind of atmosphere, kind of really kind of make it very kind of terrifying for people to kind of read and enjoy. I don't know if joy is really the right word, but you do enjoy them, I guess.
Definitely enjoy. Yeah, because it's not happening to you, don't forget. So you can enjoy.
That's true. That's
true. Somebody else.
Thank you very much, Russell.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Thanks.
So there you go. There is Russell's take on horror stories and horror books and things like that. He did send me a little correction because he realised afterwards he made a little mistake with the author of Falling Angel. It is by William Hortzberg instead of the author that he mentioned. But I think that he gave a great kind of insight into what he thinks is a great way of making horror stories really scary. I think he touched on a lot of really interesting things about really focusing on things that like phobias and that kind of unknown aspects, rather than kind of the sort of gore side of things, which can be scary obviously in its own. But I think those things that kind of make it more relatable to people can be what kind of really makes it hit home a bit and really kind of makes you a bit terrified when you're reading a good scary story. So yeah, I think and I think probably there's very few, I think, that would kind of disagree that Stephen King is the absolute king at doing that and making it a super duper scary story for everyone who is reading along with those. And that's probably why so many of them do get picked up as movies as well and kind of made into the big screen, even though, as we were mentioned, some may translate better than others. But that's not necessarily, I think, a slight on the story itself. I think that's kind of maybe sometimes down to how well the movies are made and things like that too. But that's also all down to interpretation as well. And some people will love those movies and some people may dislike them a little bit as well. My recommendation for a Halloween read, I'm going down the kids route for it because I have been reading a lot of Halloween stories to my two kids, and mine is going to be Christopher Pumpkin by Paul Linnett and Sue Hendra. And that is a fantastic story. It's a fantastic Halloween story for kids. It's a picture book, and the story basically is that there's a witch who needs some help to get ready for a Halloween party. So she brings alive a whole bunch of pumpkins to help her along. And she wants them to be scary and stuff, but Christopher Pumpkin just isn't that scary, and he wants to make the party really happy and cheery, and that doesn't kind of bode well with the whole kind of theme of the book as it goes through. But and Christopher Pumpkin is just such a likable character, and you will fall in love with him as you read the book, and it is definitely one for the little ones to read this Halloween if you haven't already done so. So definitely check that out. It's a great kind of read, and anyone who loves kind of fun stories and pumpkins will fall in love with Christopher Pumpkin for sure. Now, to round things up, there's nothing scary whatsoever about our Book Week Scotland lineup. It is now fully on the website, and you can see all the fantastic authors that we've got lined up to come along, such as Peter Ross, Pat Nevin is coming to my little library, T.F. Muir, to name a couple that I can remember off the top of my head. And I'm also doing one with Lee Adam, an online event as well, a local author, so do feel free to sign up to that and come along and hear us talk about it. You might have heard Lee in the podcast a couple of weeks ago. We were doing a kind of little event for Book Week Scotland as well. So do check that out. You can find out all the information on our online catalogue. All the events are there, and you can sign up to them on there for free and get a place to come along and then enjoy some author visits to your local libraries. And it is going to be a fantastic week of celebration for reading and for books, and it is all even more bigger success if you guys come along and take part in the events and enjoy the sessions, and even get involved with a few questions or two if you've kind of read the books and want to kind of find out a little bit more from the authors themselves. That's all for me for now, guys. I hope you have a fantastic and spooky rest of your Halloween, and have enjoyed getting some recommendations to read that might kind of carry on that spooky theme a little bit longer beyond Halloween itself. That's all for me for now, guys. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back again soon. Bye, guys.